Thanks, Kevin. So I suppose just to give you a quick background on Petrochem and who we are. The business was set up in 1978 by my father, Mick O'Shea. It was a kind of a one-man in a van concept, supplying engineering equipment and materials to the local pharmaceutical industry in Cork. And then over the years, it was kind of built up, adding on one or two people as it went, and eventually grew to 10,000 square foot unit in Little Island, expanding the product offerings, not just to pharma business, but also to food and beverage and construction, semiconductor, oil and gas. I suppose my experience with Action Coach, there's probably two main kind of episodes really. I suppose the first one is when my father first met Kevin in 2008. It was a brief encounter. My father had explained to Kevin at the time that business was dropping, and our biggest asset of our balance sheet at the time was our stock. A lot of stainless steel pipe and fittings had lost over 50% of its value over the previous 6 months, on top of us being knee deep in a recession with 25 staff. And my father was, for the first time in his life, very outgoing about business, was talking about cutting staff and cutting back severely. To which Kevin said, and it's famous folklore in Petrochem, or you can take the other option, which is you can grow. To which my father laughed in his face and said, this guy is nuts. But Kevin came on board, and I suppose what we didn't appreciate at the time was that despite us being in a lot of pain during that recession, a lot of our competition, were holding on by the skin of their teeth also. So we actually took a risk, and we set up a depot in Dunboyne outside the Dublin area. And within 24 months, two of our largest competitors went into liquidation. And what had happened then is by 2014, our turnover had doubled to what it was in 2010. And instead of cutting staff from 25 down to 15 or so, we now had 50 staff working out of both depots. So I think it's safe to say that if not for that brief encounter that my dad had with Kevin at the time, that we may not have closed our doors, but there's no way that we would have become a national company rather than a regional one, The second episode really is my father, who set up the business and was the managing director at the time, passed away very suddenly in 2017. And I was pushed from a situation overnight where I was a sales representative, enjoyed sales, but was thrown into a managing directorial role with just no experience. And a month later, I began to see Kevin regularly. And the first point of focus really, that Kevin wanted to establish was, what did I want personally for myself, never mind for the business. And it was only until I could establish what I wanted for myself were we able to sit down and map out what we wanted for the business. And I think, I was quite naive and ignorant, to be honest with you, at the time, but I'm only looking back now that you cannot make a plan going forward for your business unless you know what you want personally out of it, for yourself and for your family. And that has to come first. So at the age of 33, with no experience, I think a lot of people were expecting me to fail. I was expecting myself to fail abysmally at it. And it was quite a stressful period, but Kevin gave me structure. We set out a 10-year plan, which was ultimately that we would grow the business, but at all times, make sure we do it in such a structured fashion that if I wanted to step away or get more time back, that we could do that, rather than entrapping myself building a business that I'm stuck in the center of it. So there was a couple of points that for Action Coach and Kevin that we have been established. I suppose number one and foremost is building a strong company culture. Kevin, has a famous saying, like, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and that's very much true. That I had a great team here, that we established for a long time, but when you grow a business, it's very easy that you could lose sight of that, and that the culture can start to wane a bit. So that was critical for us, that no matter what happens, that the strong company culture of fairness, honesty, transparency will continue to prevail. The next thing that Action Coach forced me to do was to work in the business. on the business and not in the business. And I couldn't get that concept for a long time, because I could be in a car making a delivery, I could be packing boxes. The one way that Kevin got it through to me was to ask me to divide my salary down into an hourly rate, and for me to ask myself, am I giving that value back to the company on an hourly rate? Now, there's nothing wrong with someone making a delivery, or there's nothing wrong with someone packing a box if they own a business. It just depends on the type of business you're in. But for our business, it was madness. So it was a lot of discipline that had to be installed to make sure that I was at the steering wheel of the business and not a van at all points in time. Action Coach has, in terms of mapping out, my personal goals for myself and for my family, what it's allowed me to do for the business is make a lot better decisions for the long term, because my focus is much clearer. So there's no decision made here now, without giving thought to what impact it may have in 3 to 5 years' time. The big one is I'm held accountable on a weekly basis for the goals that are set, and it gives me that discipline. I'm actively working on these goals on a weekly basis, rather than it being discussion and then you come back to it in 3 or 4 months' time. Over the last 12 months with COVID-19, it's been quite a stressful period. Staff, having to look after the business, make sure it's kept healthy. It's been great to have the support from Kevin and Action Coach in terms of navigating challenges, seeing where my blind spots are. If I'm making a strategy to go down one particular avenue, it's good to have a compass there to say, look, that looks good, but you need to have a look at these particular areas. But the biggest one of all really has been the work-life balance. I was 80, 90 hour a week kind of guy, where now with the growth of the business, I'm 40 to 50 hours max. And I've been able to learn the skill set to structure the management in such a way that if I need to go at any point in time for a day or two, I can do that. I now have that choice. So I'm very lucky in that regard. Our business has been very lucky in terms of our positioning in the industry, that the impact of COVID hurt us badly between March, April and May last year, but we've rebounded quite strongly. So from 2017, when I first engaged with Kevin myself directly, I've gone from a situation where I had no iota about how to run a company, nor how to manage people, doing 20 million euros with 60 staff, to 4 years later, under Kevin's guidance, we've now got 100 staff. We're now based in the UK, and we're projected to probably have doubled our turnover this year on what we had done in 2017. And all with that, my personal goals are getting ticked because they are the priority. And the next challenge, of course, obviously is going to be, with our growth, is putting in that next layer of management structure. That's going to be absolutely critical, because you can run a risk of a company becoming too flat from an organizational structural point of view. So my advice to anyone really who owns their own business or who's thinking about setting up will be, go away and get yourself a coach who can mentor you. Make sure that you're focused on what's important for you personally, and it'll stop people go and say, I want to own a business, and they don't really understand why. And what's your why is a famous thing that a lot of people are asked, and most people don't have the answer for that. And they set up a business and they run themselves into a corner and they entrap themselves. So from that regard, I just couldn't encourage people strongly enough to do it. I would probably say with strong knowledge is that I would most likely have sold a business over the last 2 years if I didn't have an Action Coach behind me. So thank you, Kevin, and Action Coach, and we look forward to the next couple of years.